Korach is both the name of this week's Parsha and the name of the man who started a rebellion against Moses. How were Moses and Korach related? So we need to go back a little bit. We have Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and then there were 12 sons and Dinah, and one of those sons was Levi, and Levi had 3 sons, Gershon, Kehat, and Merari. You following? Okay. The middle son, Kehat, had 4 sons. One was named Amram. He might be familiar to some of you because he begot Miriam and Aaron and Moses. And another was named Izhar, and he and his wife had Korach. So Moses and Korach were first cousins. They shared a grandfather, and assumingly a grandmother. Amram was Uncle Amram to Korach, and Yizhar was Uncle Yizhar to Moses. But were Moses and Korach close cousins? Were they close family? Currently, I don't think so. From my reading of the Parsha this week and from the experience that I had this week, I don't think they were close or in each other's lives that often. If you have first cousins, are you close with every single one? Do you know in detail what they do professionally? Do you share a level of intimacy with every single one of your first cousins where you can just walk into their home without knocking first? Or if one of your first cousins is famous or a leader in a field, are you abreast of everything they do? And if you know only because of social media, that doesn't count. So my thesis this week is that Korach and Moses were not close. And that is why Korach banded together with Datan and Aviram and On, and then Korach got a megaphone-type apparatus that was appropriate for the time, and he shouted the following in an accusatory tone to Moshe in front of 250 bystanders. Rav lachem, ki kol ha'eda kulam kedoshim, uvetucham Adonai, umadua titnasu al kahal Adonai. You've pushed this too far. Every single one of us in this community is holy. Everyone, every single one. Hashem is in everyone's midst. Why are you raising yourself above everyone else? When I read that verse, when I listen to it, when I hear it, I always imagine Korach foaming at the mouth and yelling and causing a scene and maybe banging something as well. Now, the Italian commentator Saforno that I teach on Wednesday nights, he writes that Korach and his henchmen, that's my word, בחרו שעה שיהיה שם המון עם כדי לפרסם ולהעביר קול במחנה למען ירבו מתקוממים עמהם. That they dafka selected an hour of the day where there was a sizable crowd in Moshe's vicinity in order to reap the maximum benefit from that. And so that all of those who were convinced of the validity of Korach's complaints would then spread the word and bring reinforcements from the plain people in the camp. I don't think Korach could have fathomed that his words would have deadly consequences. But Korach was loud, and therefore people heard him and listened to him and believed him. And what have we learned since even before October 7th? The loud voices are the ones whose messages get through. when Israel was falsely blamed for hitting a hospital early in the war. Remember that? The New York Times and Reuters and the AP and Politico, they all picked up a false story that Israel had caused a horrific massacre in a hospital, killing many. And people read it and they believed it. That false article is the equivalent of a loud noise. An editor's note did appear a few days later on page 15 in retracting the headline in the Times, but as we all know, it was too late. What Korach did reminds me of what we see today in the public square and on social media, which has become a secondary form of a public square. People are putting untruths and false news out there and saying things without caring at all about the ramifications or the consequences, and they're doing it against us, against Jews, and against Israel. But not everyone is a Korach. There are kind people in the world. There are caring people in the world. And there are people who might have said to Moshe, "Hey, brother, you're doing a lot. We see you. We see this burden you are carrying. It's tough to be an Israelite right now. We know God chose you. How can we support you?" If these people did exist in the days of Moses, with the exception of his father-in-law Yitro, their voices were not recorded because Korach was too loud. He sucked up all of the energy. Earlier this week, I met about 50 people who I can only describe to a person as the anti-Korach. On Tuesday and Wednesday, I was out of the office participating in the Simeon Initiative Summit. Rav Baruch was there as well, which was a gathering of 100 leading Canadian Christian and Jewish faith leaders, divided just about 50-50. The goals of the summit were threefold. The first was to establish greater awareness among Christian leaders of the state and forms of anti-Semitism in Canada today, and how anti-Semitism impacts not only Canadian Jews and Jewish institutions, but also our culture and our common life as Canadians. Now, on Wednesday, I was part of a small group that included Rabbi Adam Cutler and about 5 Christian leaders, including Pastor David Larmer, who has become a friend to our community. Rabbi Cutler and I both shared how every single day we have conversations with our congregants about the impact of anti-Semitism on their lives, and that we can't hide from it, and that it seems to get worse, and that it's actually become normalized. Now, the Christian leaders understood the security situation that we Jews now need in our institutions, as the event was held at the Prosserman JCC. On any given Sunday, they just walk into their churches, whereas during this conference, they encountered countless levels of security just to enter the Jewish Community Center. A second goal was to establish greater awareness among Jewish leaders of the breadth and the forms of Christianity in Canada and the motivation for Christian leaders to combat anti-Semitism. The leaders that I met told me that they knew and they felt they were doing the right thing. We learned that Pastor Larmer wears his yellow hostage pin every single day. and not just because of the summit. And I noticed that he had a yellow sticker on the back of his cell phone case, and he wore one of these Am Yisrael Chai blue plastic bracelets. And he told us that on the weekend of our UJA Walk for Israel, for the first time ever, his church held Saturday night worship and canceled Sunday morning worship so they could walk with and support our community. Now, Reb Steve and I were both out of town for the walk. The pastor didn't join it to be with his friends. He did it to stand with us. Rabbi Cutler and I both teared up when he shared this with our group. And I looked at him and I said, "Thank you." I also learned that since October 7, a new friend, Reverend Jesse Parker, the parish priest of St. John the Evangelist Anglican Church in Port Hope, now preaches once a month from the Hebrew Bible. He wants to dwell in the space with his Jewish brothers and sisters. And he told us that on October 8th, remember, the 8th was a Sunday, he spoke from the pulpit about the ongoing attacks, because on October 8th, the pogrom, the massacre, was still ongoing. And later that day, he got an email from a retired priest who said to him something along the lines of, "Well, are you sure the Arabs' anger against the Jews wasn't justified?" Reverend Parker revealed to me that he couldn't just rebuke a 75-year-old man who had probably been walking around with such ideas in his head for a long time. So instead, he followed up with an email with a request to get some coffee and have a conversation. And then, after they spent real time together, for Christmas, the retired priest gifted my new friend Jesse a copy of Abraham Joshua Heschel's The Sabbath. Why? Because they engaged with each other. The retired priest heard Jesse and the facts that he presented in a clear and cogent way. Over and over, the Christian leaders at the conference, they referred to us Jews as their older siblings. And this was the main reason that these Christian leaders are working at combating anti-Semitism, because they feel that we are extended family. A third goal was to initiate new relationships between Christian and Jewish leaders in different cities across the country to establish greater solidarity to support action against anti-Semitism. Well, I have a few lunch and Shabbat dinner plans penciled in, and Reverend Parker, who told me that he does not miss an episode of Call Me Back, has November 4th marked in his calendar to come to Beth Tzedek to hear Dan Senor speak. So check, check, and check to all three goals. Now, you might be listening to me and thinking to yourself, "Oh my God, the rabbi, she's in La La Land." These aren't the testimonies that I watch on CBC, and these aren't the stories filling my social media. I only see the Korach-type accusations and lies. But I'm telling you, there are good Christians in this country who are philo-Semitic. Over 750 Christian leaders signed on to a Canadian Christian Declaration of Anti-Semitism. It was in the National Post, which condemned those who foment anti-Semitism in Canada. It adds, "We will stand against all those in this country, regardless of motivation or ideology, who seek to demonize and dehumanize our Jewish fellow citizens." The declaration also states, "We affirm that the Jewish people remain God's chosen people. The law and the covenants that God gave to the Jewish people, which we see as fulfilled in Christ, remain intact. And the declaration concludes with, this is the conclusion. As Christians, we will not simply speak, but act in support of you, our Jewish friends, in the interest of all that is just and good. We will not abandon you. That's how it concludes. I felt hugged at this summit, and I made new friends. This week, I met and I shared meals, and I made friends with the people who are out there saying, hey, sister, you're doing a lot. We see you. We see this burden you are carrying. It's tough to be a Jew right now. We know God chose you. We are here to support you. We are not as alone as we think, I learned this week. I literally have new numbers in my phone and dates on my calendar to deepen these new relationships and learn from each other. But these church leaders that I met this week, they're living in a world that is full of loudmouth Korachs. Their messaging is not amplified enough because of blind followers to the noise and the bots. And so based on my experiences this week, I don't think Moses and Korach were close at all. Because if they were, Korach would have known the story of Moses and of his election by God. I don't think there was a cousins club back then. And because Korach was ignorant of the truth and the facts, and because he yelled lies in the public square, all of the quieter helper voices were silenced. There's no space left for them. Most church-going Christians are philo-Semitic, which is the opposite of anti-Semitic. My new friends confidently taught me that this week. But they don't yet have the skills or the language or the clear facts. And it's probably because those loud Korach voices are loudly protesting with easy-to-remember slogans, fancy graphics, and lies. I was really grateful to be a rabbinic delegate to the Simeon Initiative, to share our current reality with these church leaders who can then bring it back to their communities. If you have friends who are not Jewish, tell them what it is like to walk into this building. Make them aware that we spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on security. Share with them how you feel when you wear Jewish symbols in non-Jewish spaces. Because you are a real person, and your friends and your family, they will listen to you more than a loud voice that they don't know who is spreading misinformation and disinformation. True change and knowledge comes from being in relationship. Korach and Moses didn't have one of those. Shabbat shalom.